Hello, everyone, and welcome to this side event on climate services for adaptation in Sub-Saharan Africa being held at the European Union Pavillion. Welcome to those in person and those online. Thank you very much for joining us. So today we'll be discussing 3 European Union-funded projects, multinational interdisciplinary projects, which are working closely on climate services to enhance adaptation in Sub-Saharan Africa. The projects are looking at issues around forecasting skill, hydrological modeling, user engagement, and other aspects to ensure that climate services can be used to support adaptation of those who need it most. These projects have been funded by the European Union under the Horizon 2020 Research Grant, and they will talk a bit more about the details of the projects. But just to give a brief, there are 2 in Eastern Africa, Down to Earth and Confer, and 1 in Southern Africa called Focus Africa. These projects are looking, well, at the start of when these projects started, one of the aspects that was asked of us was to enhance coordination and learning for sustainability and upscale of what we learn in the different projects. And throughout the project duration so far, we've tried to collaborate on various aspects, including coming together now for this side event to share some of our lessons and results. As a start, for the audience, those in person and those online, we would like to start with a question, a poll. Yes, thank you. You should be seeing the QR code and the question online. And the question is, for those in person, you can scan the QR code for access, please. Those online, you can do the same. I already see some answers coming through. So the question is, what is a climate forecast? Is it a prediction of rainfall and temperature for the upcoming season or several days? Is it an output from a climate model describing the movement of moisture and energy across the planet? Is it a reading of goat intestines to assess whether the upcoming rainy season will fail? Or is it all of the above? So I'll give you a few seconds to fill. Please, those in person, you can scan the QR code. Really looking forward to seeing the answers. And what your views are on what exactly a climate forecast is. Those online too, you can access it through the QR code or through the link. Some interesting answers coming through. 0 on a reading of goat intestines. All right. A lot coming up on all of the above. A prediction of rainfall, also featuring strongly. These are quite interesting results because it gives us an idea of what you perceive of a forecast, whether it's science, whether it's something more abstract, whether it's a combination of different factors. I'll give a few more seconds and then we continue. So, okay, it looks like all of the above is coming out strongly, and I think my colleagues will talk a bit more about this in their presentation, especially Michael Singer from Down to Earth. And some of the aspects will feature in the different presentations that you will see today. So thank you for those results. At this point, I would like to hand over to Nicholas Belay of ICPAC, who will talk about our first project, Confer. Thank you, Nicholas. Over to you.
Hello, good morning everyone, and thank you for joining us this morning at this early time at COP. My name is Nicholas Belay. I work for ICPAC, which is a regional climate center based in Nairobi and covering East Africa. And I lead the communication work of ICPAC and the work we do on climate information as well. And this morning I would like to talk to you a little bit about Confer, which is one of those 3 sister projects funded by the European Union under the Horizon 2020 Research and Innovation Programme. So Confer is a consortium of 9 partners led by a Norwegian research centre, NORSE, based in Norway. It's a 4-year programme running from 2020 to 2024, and as you have seen on the previous slide, the partners are based in Norway, Kenya, the UK, Germany, and South Africa. And we have quite well-defined remit. The objective of Confer is to co-develop climate services for 3 sectors, which are the water, the energy, and the food security sectors in East Africa. In terms of the zone that we cover, it's quite large, and it reflects the mandate of ICPAC, which is to provide climate services to 11 countries in Eastern Africa, from Sudan to the north, all the way down to Tanzania. So it's the greater horn of Africa. Confer scientists and the researchers are focusing on three areas and trying to develop new climate services for the region. The first one is on river stream flow, and flood risks. So being able to determine the flow of rivers and spot, where there is a risk of flooding. The second one is to come up with an agreed definition of when is the onset of the rainfall season. When does it start? It's not the same, in many different parts of the region and for different sectors as well. And the third one is to come up with a product that would determine in advance what the crop yields and the crop health will be. And they are doing this by working on satellite data and data from the ground. So these three products are being developed, as we speak. The methodology that Confer uses is one of co-production. It means that we bring together all stakeholders in climate services. It's called the value chain of climate services. If you look at this web, you've got end user, at the bottom. You've got KenGen, which is one of the largest providers of electricity in Kenya. KMD, which is the Kenya Meteorological Department, and us at IGAD and ICPAC, the climate agency. Climate information. So once we have once we have developed, a climate services product, it is essential that these are properly disseminated and reach, the people they are supposed to serve. And for that, we need to have timely, accurate, accessible, and actionable climate information, which is distributed through the relevant channels. So at ICPAC, in the climate, in the communications team, we have built a strong network of users, people, we have about 10,000 subscribers to our products who get our forecast, be it weekly, monthly or seasonal. So they get it via email, and they get it a lot on social media. So we have grown dramatically in the last 2 or 3 years our social media followers, and we receive some very good feedback on the information that is disseminated through ICPAC. Strong media engagement as well, so proactively and reactively as well. We work with the media in the sense that, of course, we have to disseminate the climate information that we provide, especially for the seasonal forecast. But we have to contribute to the discussion, the public discussion on climate change and climate information in the region. So our experts take part in many interviews and engage with the press at the regional and international level on an almost daily basis. Together with Focus Africa and Down to Earth, we publish a policy brief on climate, on the sustainability of climate services in the region. The first one was published earlier this year in April, looking at the integration of indigenous and traditional knowledge in scientific forecast. And finally, together, we provide webinars, we organize webinars on the whole value chain of climate services. But we realized that there was one element of the jigsaw that was missing, which is how to engage with communities on the ground, how to make sure that climate information is received by people who in the end need it the most. And for that, we realized that we missed, we didn't have the network on the ground that was required to do this job, and we decided to partner with BBC Media Action, which is the international development arm of the BBC. And with them, we have produced a series of podcasts that we're going to launch in a few minutes. So I'll come back to them. But we have worked with BBC through their network on the ground in the Horn of Africa to produce up to 50 radio programs on climate information through very hyper-local community radios, and we have provided this information in local languages in Ethiopia, Kenya, Somalia, South Sudan, and Uganda. So if you have a look at those pictures, these were taken in, this one was taken, sorry, in northern Kenya by the BBC. And it shows you the BBC Media Action in action. Here, one of their journalists, interviewing a herder and trying to get her feedback, because it's very important to get the feedback. And it's not only providing information to communities, it's also getting the feedback from the communities about what they need, what is missing, what is challenging for them in terms of climate information. So here, another of their journalists working with a community in Kenya as well. It is well known that radio is by far, the best medium to connect with communities on the ground at the hyperlocal level. Forget iPhones, forget text messages. These are great as well, but radio is really the way to connect with these people. And through BBC Media Action and funders and partners, communities receive these small radio stations that are powered, by small solar panel. You can see it on the side of the radio. And BBC does a lot of mentoring of local journalists. So these journalists who work in community radios often, lack the scientific knowledge to talk about climate information. And they, we found that in the survey that we did, that many journalists, struggle with the scientific, concepts that lie behind climate change and climate information. So the work of the BBC, of BBC Media Action, is really to deconstruct, all of this and to help journalists produce very crisp and very simple stories on climate change and on climate information, stories that can be shared, of course, with their communities. I mentioned a series of podcasts that we have produced and that are being launched, in a few minutes. So we decided, we have done a lot of work, as you have just seen, on reaching local communities, but we felt that beyond that, we really wanted to bring the discussion about climate change and climate information to a wider audience. So people, especially donors and policymakers, who sometimes are a bit disconnected, with what's happening on the ground. So again, we engaged with BBC and we went through the Horn of Africa to collect the testimonies, first-hand testimonies of communities and listen, from them how it is to live, through climate change. And out of that, we have produced 5 podcasts in English, about 20-25 minutes, long, that really tell us, in the global north, what is happening on the ground. And we can listen to an extract of the first episode, all of them being released today. Thank you.
For most people around the world, weather forecasts are easily available, used to help decide what to wear, whether to go on a hike or a picnic, or simply whether to carry an umbrella. Many of us take for granted that understandable and accurate weather forecasts will be available at the end of news bulletins or delivered by our favorite radio station DJ. Most smartphones display the weather on their home screens. But imagine you're a herder living in the dry lands of Eastern Africa, having to trek for hundreds of kilometers in search for water and pasture for your animals, without access to a phone or even a radio. Or perhaps a farmer whose only source of water was rainfall.
The weather has changed. When I was a child, we used to have 2 rainy seasons, one in April and one in September. But these days seasons have changed. In April, instead of rains, there is severe drought and intense heat.
There used to be a lot of water and pasture. Now, when we go to the areas where there used to be water, we find that it dried out long time ago.
For these people, understanding changing weather patterns is a matter of life and death, because how they eat and how they earn money depends on whether or not it rains. I'm Diana Jerry from BBC Media Action, and this is the first in a series of podcasts exploring how people in East Africa are living with climate change.
Thank you. So here it is. On the podcast, are now live on the BBC Media Action website. You can find them as well on different platforms, on Spotify, Amazon, they're on YouTube, they're on Acast as well, which is a platform that distributes onto other platforms, so I'm told. So they have a wide reach. We have 5 episodes of about 20-25 minutes each, starting from forecasting, adaptation, decision making, how to project the weather, that's in a sort of like longer time scale, 30, 50 years, and finally looking at policy, what governments could be doing, or what the world could be doing in terms of fighting climate change. And of course, the last episode talks a lot about loss and damage, which, as you all know, has been figuring prominently at COP this year. I've listened to the 5 podcasts because with BBC we worked on them so much. They are great. It's a fantastic opportunity to listen to people whose voice are not heard. We really went to the we couldn't go further from Nairobi, London, or New York. It is really first-hand testimonies of people who are living at the forefront of climate change, and I think it's not only extremely interesting to hear, but I think we all have a moral duty to listen to these people. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Nicholas, for that presentation on Confer projects. Thanks for the applause as well from the audience. Very interesting work that is being done by Confer, and nice to see that you're looking across the entire climate services value chain, from understanding user needs and their perspectives to the climate science, and then actually to the communication and how they use that information for decision making. So really good work being done there. And also nice to see aspects of policy support, because the policy environment is also quite important. On that note, I would like to hand over to Winnie Kahemba of Climate Analytics, who will talk a bit about the work that is being done under the Down to Earth project. Thank you very much. Welcome, Winnie.
Thank you very much, Sebastian, and a warm welcome to everyone joining us today. Thank you very much for coming to our session. So the Down to Earth project is an EU Horizon 2020 funded research project that is basically looking at translation of climate information into multi-level decision support for adaptation policy development, as well as enhanced resilience in the Horn of Africa drylands, specifically in Ethiopia, Kenya, and Somalia, because we do realize that water scarcity within this region actually leads to food insecurity. So I am going to shortly just share a video that will give a little bit more detail about the Down to Earth project. But on this slide, you have a QR code that also leads you to a page where you can find some of the outputs and more information about this particular Down to Earth project. I will now move to the video. Communities in the Horn of Africa drylands are increasingly impacted by water and food insecurity influenced by a changing climate. In drylands, climate has an indirect role in controlling water, and water resources are directly linked to food insecurity. Therefore, it is important to share and exchange climate information services with rural subsistence communities. Yet, agropastoral communities in Ethiopia, Kenya, and Somalia do not have capacity to adapt to climatic challenges.
The changing climate has had severe impact on pastoral communities across the Horn of Africa drylands. The increasing frequency and intensity of drought has devastated livestock herds due to shrinking pasturelands and limited water supplies. The droughts have inflicted heavy damage on lives and livelihoods of pastoral communities.
Longer and intense drought periods have negatively affected and impacted the agricultural communities who practice subsistence rainfed farming. When rain fails in key rainy seasons, the agricultural communities are unable to grow the crops they need to feed their families. And in the Horn of Africa, recent and current drought conditions have pushed the Horn of African drylands into food insecurity.
Water for human societies and livestock are normally sourced from rainfall, but in the Horn of Africa drylands, there are no permanent water sources, so rural communities rely on shallow wells and rainwater harvested in earth pans and underground systems. In dry periods, those water bodies normally dry up, and the societies are put to scramble in search of water.
Down to Earth, we are working closely with the rural community to incorporate their perspective into our project work. So we are working to understand their challenges, their information needs, and long-term adaptation to climate change, and also to societal resistance to existing resilience to climate change.
Very good. One of the major contributions of the Down to Earth project is the development of new decision support tools to translate climate information into water and land information that is critical for climate adaptation decision support system at regional, national, and subnational levels, and also of high potential use by NGOs and civil societies in the Horn of Africa dry region. Our innovative dryland-specific modeling captured the process of land storage at and below land surface at the Horn of Africa dry region.
As part of Down to Earth, we're going to make sure that we deliver the information that people need through the ways that they interact with already. We'll use digital technology, such as mobile phones and smartphones, to support communities, but we want to make sure it integrates with the ways that people use digital technology at the moment.
We are strengthening capacity of institutions for a range of end users, from climate services organizations to local communities. Our project is expanding data collection networks, embedding our impact modeling to climate services provision, and supporting novel policy frameworks for climate adaptation.
Using innovative approaches and cutting-edge science, the Down to Earth project brings together a range of experts from Africa and Europe. This is to enhance societal resilience to climate change within rural communities through the provision of climate information services and the strengthening of capacities for governments and non-governmental organizations.
Down to Earth is developing and enhancing communication to different audiences. We are also doing training to local journalists on how to report climate information, how to do a series of webinars, podcasts, and also how to do films on climate adaptation in local communities. The project is also employing impact modeling of water and food forecasts to support the existing desktop and mobile technologies designed for decision makers.
Our project is bringing climate information from multiple sources and levels down to earth to make a positive impact in rural dryland communities.
I hope you enjoyed this particular video clip, and as I said before, you can go and watch it again at the link provided. But basically, the Down to Earth project brings together about 14 organizations based in 8 different countries in Europe, Ethiopia, Kenya, and Somalia. And all of these experts come with various disciplines. Some of them are humanities experts, media, climate modelers, hydrologists, so they all bring all these expertise to the project to be able to provide this decision support for communities to be able to adapt to climate change and to also enhance their resilience. This particular project is working to basically advance climate information services within the Horn of Africa drylands that are impacted with water scarcity as well as food insecurity. And we are working to produce various outputs, and these include hydrological models that we are working on. We will also have policy analysis reports that are an outcome of this particular project. We are also going to have publications that come out of this project that try to address some of the issues within the region, with the aim of really being able to have end users enhance their resilience and really ramp up their adaptation to climate change impacts, which is a major concern within the Horn of Africa drylands. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much, Winnie, for that overview of the Down to Earth projects. Quite interesting, again, on how you are looking at the climate science, but also focusing a lot on the user engagement and communication, both for the users, but also outwards to policymakers and decision makers to support resilience for farmers in the communities in the Horn of Africa. So with that overview of Down to Earth, I think now we'll get a bit more specific aspects of what is happening with the climate and some specific examples. And with that, I'll introduce Michael Singer of Cardiff University to talk a bit more about what Down to Earth is doing, but taking some very specific examples in the Horn of Africa. Thank you, Michael.
Thank you, Sebastian. And thank you, Winnie, for introducing the Down to Earth project. People may not realize it, but right as we speak, the Horn of Africa drylands is experiencing an unprecedented 5th consecutive season of drought, of below normal rainfall, which is causing immense problems across the region. You can see in this slide that livestock herds are being decimated. They're hungry and thirsty and in search of food and water. Agricultural yields are dropping, and famine is already being declared in Somalia and is probably on the horizon for several other countries in the region. A 6th consecutive failed rainy season is predicted for the upcoming March, April, May time in 2023, when we're dating back to drought conditions all the way back to October of 2020. So this is a severe circumstance that's being faced, and it's impacting the lives and livelihoods across the region. But one of the things we don't know is how people make decisions that are relevant to their lives and livelihoods. How do they use climate information to make critical decisions that affect them? I'm going to show you a short video that was commissioned by University of Bristol with BBC Media Action that tackles that question.
Nyarta ko kita perlu yang aku pone boy na berbe ko prial nyarta wis na ko prial lo asala ni boy ni ya orang ne to mlangan ko ma ya gara wi ini tini ma to gara takan kan awi bare ne boy che boy yo amnya kan amana lu ko nyikin ruwa ko ate ko ni ara ko la ko tetap ara ko chete ya ra ko oh, ni aling aru ya aru ama deh. Mamanya tiap nak juga dong. Buyu tuh anak kamu kau. Ya ni ramnya kereta ramah ni kalman. Bujang tuh dua buat, buat torbu. Ini mulat, bujang bar nanti kaya. Buju tu kaya kamu. Ama kota, ama panang deh. Amunyo. Buyu tuh, itu buyu. Aku ni tajam pun dengan korang ada. Tuh ber. Mana tahu narar kena kamu buju kau. Mamu aku ada ni ya turku. Arba ni agro na malte. Ini zagar ba tama. Palas ngamalte ni naik. Ada orang yang karu. Orang karu jago seke arai seke karu jago lo itu pun. Ini zagu jadi mari. Ini dulu dia cia. Mani aku berarti. Kotor batu batu. Ini jangan ibu ya. Karena tahu nak kena makar ni batu. Allah na tahu nak kru ye. Aita lo kru ama. Aita lo ringkiti. Tendang tu orang jago. Batu macam jago lo aja bukan. Amukan rupa keras ang raya mamanya kita dengar deh, yang tu ngerti dah. Kuper mau wah ini, yang kuper mau apa orang ni anak nak kita itu tukur bener banget. Untuk ini elewat. Aku orang akan yang nak penting itu nak amal tu. Pakai kau bocor na ada yang amal tu. Kau atau marah karulah hai, rono. Awak tan ini karulah jok. Jaga tamari. Jok karulah itu pun mana. Itu pun ya lapang ni. Orang nak kerja. Muji karulah jok. Kacau puru. Muji larun aku lo tahu. Lalu itu nabi. Oh ni je ke tu kau makalu karulah tahu. Lalu ni tu marah ni aku.
Majina mimi naitwa Father Philip Echom na ninakaa katika kijiji cha Naoros. Kusamani tulikuwa nafuka mbuzi nyingi, ng'ombe nyingi, lakini siku hizi hiyo mambo yote hakuna. Media ilipokuja Lodwar, watu wa maredio sana Mata ilikuwa imetusaidia sisi, huwa tunasikiza Jumatano saa 1 mpaka saa 2 kwamba mambo ya kupanda shamba ile ndogo katika Bamalaku, na tena kuna expert ambao huwa wanakuja kwa hiyo redio, wanatupunza sana, tunasikiza kabisa. Hata kama hakuna maji, ile maji unasafishia nayo vyombo, umwagia hapo alafu ukule. Sasa tangu sisi tutujue hiyo namna hiyo ujuzi, tukawa sasa tunapanda shamba na tukapanda pia watermelon, tukapanda viazi kienyeji, tukakula. Sasa tumegundua kwamba kumbe kuna chakula tu hapa karibu hapa, na hiyo hata watoto wetu walikuwa tunakaa hivyo wakati wote waboigoi sana, wanapelekwa kikidimi kinini. Mambo ya kienyeji huwa haifanyiki sana, inafanyika tu labda 20%, lakini ya radio inakuanga 90%.
Kwa majina naitwa Summit Yoko. Mimi ni chief wa Lokiriama location. Mimi nikiwa chief wa hii area. Kazi yangu ni kusaidiana na community ama kulinki community na information yoyote ambayo inatoka katika serikali kuu. Niko na namba ya mtu meteorological hapa. Whenever there is any information about the weather forecast ananitumia. Wakati tunaweka mkutano tunajaribu kuuliza, tueleze mambo ya insecurity, tueleze mambo ya nyasi mahali inapatikana kwa wingi, tueleze mambo ya mvua kama kuna mtu ako na habari. So all this information is shared in all meetings kama kuna hiyo information. Njia nyingine ambayo ninapata information ni kutoka kwa masimu, kwa mtandao. Alafu mahali pengine ambayo ninapata information ni kwa watu wa early warning, ambaye kwa sahizi ni watu wa NDMA, National Drought Management Authority. Nyingine ni pia ni kwa local radio FMs. Unajua sasa wakati niko na mkutano ama wao wako na mkutano ambaye mimi nimehudhuria, kila mtu ambaye ako na information anapata nafasi ya kuongea. Hiyo information ambayo ninapata na pia hiyo experience itanipatia hiyo nafasi ya kuelimisha watu wengine na pia kueleza watu wengine ile vitu ambazo nimejisomea, nimepata, ili wao pia iwasaidie kama jamii.
So as you can see, we're starting to get a handle on the ways in which people get access to information in order to support their decision-making in really difficult circumstances. And our plan is to use that information to develop tailored climate services that can actually reach rural communities through WhatsApp communication, through mobile phone apps, and through radio. We're exploring various options in this project to help people through this currently drier drought conditions. Now, it's not all bad news. In spite of the fact that there are long-term drought trends across this region, we've done some work recently analyzing the historical water storage within the region. And we've identified that even though the rains have been failing more frequently, when it does rain, it rains intensely enough to actually deliver that rain into the subsurface below the soil layer where it doesn't get returned to the atmosphere. And that water ends up getting banked as underground water storage in groundwater aquifers. And we've done some work on this. There's a publication listed here, as well as a blog post we did recently on the conversation. We invite people to go and check that out. But thank you very much. Keep track of the work that Down to Earth is doing. Here's some contact information for our project, and we look forward to connecting with you.
Thank you very much, Michael, for that presentation. Before I let you go, what exactly is the answer to the question? What is a climate forecast?
Yes. Well, I think most people put all of the above, and I would say that is correct. There are many ways that people get forecasted information to support decision making, from goat intestines to radio to scientific forecasts delivered through sophisticated apps. So everything counts.
Thank you very much, Michael. So again, we are seeing that there is the climate science, but there are also user aspects. Local and indigenous knowledge plays a key role, understanding the context and communication. Even in terms of communication, in the videos, you talked of understanding what communication works for different users. So it's not always just radio or just text message or just WhatsApp, but really tailoring it to the user is quite important. So at this point, I would like us to talk about the third project being featured today, and that is Focus Africa, that is coordinated by the World Meteorological Organization, a project that I personally work on. And it has a different dimension that we're going to talk about today. We've heard a lot about agriculture in the first two presentations, although they did touch on water and energy. But we have a slightly different angle, hydropower, in Focus Africa, which is just one of the many aspects, including agriculture. And for this, I would like to introduce Lucy Mtilatila, the Director of the Department of Climate Change and Meteorological Services in Malawi. And she will give us a bit about Focus Africa, what the specific work in the country, drought impacts in Lake Malawi and the Shira River basins, and the impacts of a 2 degrees Celsius rise in temperature on the country. Thank you very much, Lucy.
Thank you very much, and I would like to welcome you all to this event, and also I would like to thank the organizers for inviting me to be part of this session. Yes, I'm going to share with you about the Focus Africa. This is a project that is being piloted in Southern Africa, basically in 3 countries, Malawi, Tanzania, and Madagascar. But in Malawi, it's really focusing on food security, as well as energy and water. It is a consortium of various institutions from Europe and Africa, which we are working together so that we can address some of the knowledge gaps and also enhance climate services in the region. So basically, it's a project that has started a year ago, and we hope that at the end of it all, we'll have some services that will support the use of climate information and increase the number of uptake of this information in Malawi. This is an EU-funded project, and it is building on various studies that have taken place in Malawi previously. And an example of them is this one, which is the work that was done in collaboration with Potsdam University in Germany, where we are looking on the drought trends in Malawi. And in this picture where we are seeing how rainfall is decreasing in the region, at the same time temperature is increasing. So because of those two, drought also is increasing in Malawi. Of course, when we see meteorological drought increasing, we've also noted that this is affecting the lake level, which is now translating into hydrological drought. We've noted that the lake level in Malawi is decreasing. Actually, the lake is the one that you are seeing on the map, which covers almost a quarter of the country, is the major water resource for Malawi. However, the studies are showing that the level of this lake is also going down. And this lake is also a source of hydropower because there is a river that runs from this lake southwards. It's called Shire River. That's where 99% of electricity in Malawi is generated. So the work also proceeded to see how the increase, for example, of the global limit of 2 degrees Celsius can affect this water resource, in particular the lake level, the Shire River flow, and also drought. So the studies have shown that if the global limit of temperature increases, for example, by 2 degrees, the lake level may decline by 0.6 meters. And now the Shire River flow, which is the main source of electricity, the flow would decline by almost 30%. Already we are seeing that this will impact the hydropower generation and other water sectors that are using the water downstream. At the same time, this 2 degrees also is increasing the drought intensity by 81%. And also it's even increasing the area that is affected by drought. At the same time, even the drought months are also increasing. In this case, with 2 degrees, the drought months per year may increase by 6 months. So in brief, this is the foundation of the studies that we are doing. Actually, even the figure that we have on our left, I believe, on our left, you can see those crosses is also showing the instances where the outflow from the lake may cease, may stop completely. In other words, the Shire River that we are referring to may tend to be a seasonal instead of a perennial river. In those instances, for example, when the temperature increase is 1.5 degrees, and if this is associated with a decrease in rainfall of 20%, and then there will be no outflow from the lake into the Shire River. So these are some of the implications of climate change on water resources in Malawi. Thanks to the colleagues from Potsdam University who have done this work. I would like to recognize other people that have done this work like Axel Blonston. Otherwise, I would like to emphasize that the Focus Africa information is available, and we are trying to upgrade what we've done before and also relate it to the hydropower generation. And we, as you can see on this figure where there are so many consortiums that are institutions that are working in this, in those yellow. Together, we are working together and see how we can address the gaps that are available in terms of food security, of course, and in this case, water and energy in Malawi. Otherwise, thank you so much.
Thank you very much, Lucy. A very quick question. From the studies that you have done and the work that has been done under Focus Africa, I know you used CMIP5. What is the difference now? What is being done now under Focus Africa that is different?
Yes, because the global models have been also upgraded or should be revised, kind of. So the work also that is partly on this is one, to consider the SIMP6, the models, to see how they can predict the future, at the same time hydropower. And also considering that there is a lot of investment going on in the Shire River on electricity. So would like also to see the sustainability and how the adaptation can be done in regard to the other investments that are being installed on this river in the future to sustain the electricity production in Malawi.
Thank you very much, Lucy. So thank you for that presentation. As I've mentioned before, I really wish that more people could see the impacts of climate change on water resources. It's really drastic impacts, the reduction in water levels, the reduction in water flow, the change from to a seasonal river from a perennial one. These are really major impacts, and not just on the water resources itself, but on people, and that's quite key. How will this impact people? You mentioned electricity generation, for example. How do you design infrastructure, or what is the impact of existing infrastructure based on those changes? So really, really interesting. So thank you very much to all the panelists for the presentations and discussions. At this point, we'd like to open to the audience for any questions. And we still have some time left, just over 10 minutes. And we'll be glad to take a few questions from the audience.
Hi, so thank you for the presentation. I came from China. I just heard the wonderful practice you're using cell phone to provide the climate information to the local people for them to make decisions. So my question is how this program sustain after the EU aid, or so who is pay for this service?
Excellent question. This is really a bigger question about the legacy of projects like this. Obviously, we have a 4-year funding cycle. At the end of it, we don't want to walk away and think that everything we did is just going to fall apart. We're hoping that what we do is strengthening adaptive capacity across the region in a lasting way. So to address the issue of the apps, originally we had thought about creating our own mobile phone app and hosting it within the key climate services organization within the region, which is ICPAC. But as we started to explore this more, we realized that it might be more powerful to use existing app services that already have standing user bases and active members. And then just enhance what they do. So that's what we're working on right now within Down to Earth, focusing on an agricultural app within Ethiopia, a water resources app within Somalia, and a pastoralist app in Kenya as pilots for how this sort of thing might work and be scaled up, but not exclusively to those apps. Hope that answers your question.
Thank you for the presentations. My question is for. Thank you for the presentations. My question is for Focus Africa project. What all indices, climate indices, are taken care of in the Focus Africa project? Is it only droughts, or is it or it's floods and other tropical cyclones in case of, especially in Madagascar?
Yeah, on the Focus Africa on food security, basically we are looking at climate services in terms of the seasonal forecast, which is basically looking at the issues that most farmers are really concerned, issues of the onset of the season, the dry spells within the season, and the length of the season. Basically, that's the area that we are working on right now when it comes to seasonal forecasts on food security. While in water, water is slightly different because we are looking at how the models are capturing the future of the water resources in the region to give to provide information to managers of water to make proper decisions. Because as I said earlier, there are investments that are being drawn into this catchment. So we want to make sure that the investments that are coming in, they are sustainable enough long years to come. So we are looking more on long-term basis when it comes to water and energy. Yeah, so it's covering everything, drought, whether it's flood, but everything encompassing, just to make sure that the investments that are being done, they are sustainable. Yeah.
Yeah, just to add that we have some interesting work that has just been shared by one of our partners on onset work based on monsoon in Eastern Africa. And if you go to the Focus Africa website, based on the link that was provided, the QR code, you'll find more information on that. But like Lucy said, onset prediction is quite key. We're also looking at other indicators like standardized precipitation index and SPEI. So yeah, we are trying to identify, based on the different users and sectors, what are the indicators that are useful for them, and then supporting them to enhance that process of using the information in their decision making.
All right, I have two questions. The first one, I think you talked about the water levels happening in Malawi, and there is that huge threat. I'm just been interested to understand if there is an alternative which has been working on in order to address that problem. The other question is to, I've learned a case of Kenya where people in the villages, they are able to access information. Now, some African countries, they are in fact struggling, mainly those that are staying in the villages. They are struggling in the case that they cannot even afford to have a proper phone where they'll be able to get those messages. For example, a case of Mozambique, a case of Malawi, where villages are clearly struggling to get that proper phone. And also there is a problem of network where they cannot be able to access those phones even if they have been given. What are we doing in order to reach to those people so that whenever that we are trying to adapt to whatever the informations, at least we need to go as a team, not only for those that are staying in towns, but we need to go as a team to take almost every person to be involved so that we should address the problem of climate change as a team, but not as a particular region, kind of.
Thank you very much. Indeed, there is a threat when it comes to water levels and in terms of also the application of this water into the energy sector. That's why we are bringing out this so that probably some adaptation measures should be put in place as we are investing more in the catchment. Like right now, most of the hydropower, they are just relying on the river flows. So probably issues of having some dams in maybe can support to make sure that we store some water that can be used in an event where the flow is not adequate. That's another option. Or maybe diversifying, because here we are investing everything in one river, which is also very, very, daring. Maybe diversifying, also considering other areas, considering other energy alternatives, maybe also can be another option. So that's why we are bringing this to make sure that the decisions can be made based on these issues. Yeah, thank you.
I can address the issue about the phone access. It is a big problem. There are many places without sufficient mobile phones, and certainly that creates a challenge in the present tense. Just make 2 points about this. First of all, it won't be that way forever. With the expansion of cellular networks and also with the kind of proliferation of phone technology, we will start seeing penetration of mobile phones in rural villages around the whole world, and even in rural Africa, where we don't have it currently. But in the meantime, that's not the only source of information. I mean, I think Nicholas was highlighting radio, and our film as well highlighted how much radio is really a lifeline for many, many people. And the key thing is to think about what sorts of messages we want to deliver through radio that can help support climate adaptation at the rural level, rather than waiting for a government agency to come and tell people what to do or give them advice.
Just to follow up on your penetration response, do you have targets, like to say by a certain particular period, I think by that period, I think everyone will be included? Do we have such targets?
It's not really my expertise to say, but I do know that there's been a huge expansion in the countries that we're working on in Down to Earth, even over the last 5 years. So it seems to be increasing, but I don't have specifics about telecommunications.
I just wanted to echo what Michael has said about radio. Every single survey shows that the best way to reach the last mile, to reach communities that do not live in places where there is network coverage, is through radio, local radio, community radios, and that can be done to disseminate regular climate information. That's the forecast on a daily or weekly basis. But of course, alerts, when things are taking a bad turn, be it drought or floods. But there is a lot of work being done as well at the local level on how to adapt, to climate change. And what was shown in your video, Michael, about the vegetable gardens, this is something that has happened, in the Horn of Africa, thanks to the work that BBC has done over there. So many flies, and that's educating people, who live in very, very dry lands on how to harvest, the very little water that they have and how to use it to grow vegetables and then have a source of food. So these educating, programs play a huge role as well in helping people to adapt and to adjust, to the new reality of climate change. So again, yeah, and one point that, sorry, I forgot to mention, it's the MOOC. The MOOC stands for Massive Open Online Course. It's a free resource that we have developed, that ICPAC has developed with BBC Media Action last year. So it's a free course for journalists it's tailored to journalists in East Africa, but it can be used across Africa. 5 modules, very simple, that take journalists on a journey of reporting on climate change, going behind the scientific concept that lie on climate change, and how to produce stories that are engaging, that are very simple and accessible to a wide audience. The MOOC exists, it's on the BBC Media Action website. It is, for the time being, in English, in French, and in Swahili. We are looking into translating it into Somali, Arabic, Oromo, and Amharic. Thank you, that's the last one. So yeah, this is a resource that is really, really helpful to journalists in order to bring the conversation about climate change and climate adaptation to a wide audience. Thank you.
Okay, thank you very much to everyone. I think we are just about out of time, so I don't think we can take any more questions. Thank you very much to the audience here in person and to those online for listening. Thank you to all the panelists representing the 3 projects, Focus Africa, Down to Earth, and Confer, and to the European Union for funding the projects and giving us this opportunity to talk about some of the emerging findings. Just to highlight very quickly a few key messages. We've seen from the presentations that climate change is set to have a major impact on agriculture, food security, and water resources in Sub-Saharan Africa. Examples were shown for Kenya and Malawi. We also seen that climate services have a major role to play in resilience and adaptation of people in the continent, particularly in food security, but also areas like hydropower development. We emphasize that it's not only about the science, but also about the communication. We need to look at the whole climate services value chain, from understanding the user needs to the climate science to the dissemination of the information. Sustainability was mentioned by some of our audience members, and this is a key issue that we are looking at. How do we enhance sustainability and support sustainability of the work that we are doing? And lastly, we noted that apart from the climate services, there's aspects of policy and actual support to adaptation. So when we have the information, how do we actually support the farmers, the water resources users, the other climate services users to use that information to adapt and be more resilient to climate change? With that, thank you very much for listening in. Goodbye, everyone.